Thank you all for coming. This is a subject that I have a lot of interest in and we're having a lot of fun with right now. My name is Matt Penner. I'm with the Val Verde Unified School District. We're down in Southern California in the Riverside area. I'm also a CITE board member. That's been a lot of fun. So hopefully you're enjoying the conference, have enjoyed it. And the keynote session, that was a lot of fun, what we just had. But part of why I'm giving this talk and others is I am deeply passionate about the work we do. And ensuring that we take care of our own. I think IT is one of the most incredible places we can work, and for education, we can do the most amazing things. I remember being in a presentation with the head of who designed CalPads at the time 10 years ago, and he basically said, we live in an Amazon world, but we're not Amazon, so don't expect it. And I was like, well, why not? You know, that's not an excuse to me. But the only way we can keep providing incredible value and blowing people's minds away with all the talent and everything that we can do is we've got to find a way to make sure we take time to breathe, make sure we reduce our own workload. And so I'm a software developer by profession before I became a director. And so I am fiercely interested in anything that can make my job easier, automation and other tools, so that I can get rid of the mundane stuff and get to the really cool stuff, because there's just too much expectation, as we all know. And so that's kind of my interest in a lot of this stuff. And then, of course, I'm just a techie geek, so I get to play with all kinds of stuff. But part of this is, my presenter remote's not working here. There we go. So first of all, just out of curiosity from the group, how many of you are currently playing in the cloud or doing anything in the cloud? Most all of you, cool. GCP, AWS, Google, Amazon, Azure, Microsoft, Azure? Okay, anyone else on anything other than Azure? No, we're all Azure people, cool. I do have some friends playing with the other stuff. Why are you playing with it? Just for curiosity, do you have anything in production?
DNS.
DNS?
Tertiary DNS server in Azure. So
awesome.
DR, right? That's
yeah.
At this point, our main objective, right?
Yes. Cool. We're interested in a lot of that stuff too. So kind of our agenda is we're going to talk about where we are, what the value is. Cloud can be scary. Cloud can be unknown as far as skill set and keeping the business running, also the fiscal side of things. And up until recently, it's been extremely costly. And so I want to talk about why go and how to get there. First of all, has anyone heard of, virtual data centers? How many of you have a virtual data center? Well, probably most of you. What flavor? VMware. Anyone have a Microsoft? No? Hyper-V? No? You do? Cool. We'll have a wrestling match later. No, but why do we have virtual data centers? We went in our district about 10, 11 years ago. It was a scary thing. And our network manager at the time was like, no, we'll never ever run on this virtual stuff. We're on bare metal, and that's what we know, and that's what we're going to do. I mean, would you ever go back? How many of you would open a school district today and use bare metal servers? Right? No. Why not? Just audience participation, throw out just a couple ideas. Why would you not? What's the point of virtual?
Baked-in redundancies and usually more cost effective.
More cost effective?
Much more flexible. You can do things like add memory, add storage, do all the stuff on the fly.
When's the last time you had to wait installing something because you had to physically go install some RAM on a board, right? So anyone have an Exchange server anymore? Remember those days? Anyone actually remember having an Exchange server? Why would we never go back to that? It was a disaster. It was a necessary service. We all ran it. Maybe if you're old enough to be in the data center at that time, for us anyway, we pretty much had an engineer that spent 60 to 75% of his day maintaining Exchange. It was a problem. That was scary. We moved to Office 365 for our email, and that was extremely scary. But we did it, and I don't think anyone would ever talk about running their own on-prem mail server. And so it's all about eliminating non-value and maximizing our business value. And so we try to do that all the time, right? Okay. So why aren't more of us on cloud? And why does that even make sense in this idea? So then we start thinking, okay, well, why not do that with everything? And when I say everything, I'm talking about Absolutely everything. So why don't our business teams and districts outsource IT? Another question for the audience. And if we can't answer that question, then maybe they should be. Anyone want to venture a guess?
Say,
Jerry.
I know some agencies that did that or tried that and
Yeah.
had some pretty bad outcomes because, again, it's an external company that's servicing multiple
Yeah.
customers, and they didn't get the time and attention they really thought they should get. Things were half-baked or not delivered. Basically a mess, but that idea comes up occasionally.
It does.
Sounds cheaper than having to hire staff and do all the other things.
Sounds cheaper. We had a charter school near us that outsourced their IT. They got rid of their IT department. But as you mentioned, when you outsource, a lot of times you're outsourcing more than just the expertise, and they don't work with your teachers, right? Their core business value is not education and teaching. The other thing too is we have the context value, right? I should ask that question. So we provide context, right? We have a lot of incredible partners that we work with. We do a lot of crazy things. We're dealing with esports right now. We're dealing with MFA. We work with a lot of people. We have dark fiber. We're pushing our software-defined networking out more. This is new stuff to us. And so we have incredible partners that really know a lot about that stuff, but they don't know how to do this within the context of education. So when we talk about the need to keep 25,000 Chromebooks up and running across 23 campuses, when we talk about needing to incorporate esports and cybersecurity and all that while also running a business team and while including special ed and PII and ARIES and all this other data, that's value that we provide. That's where we come in. And plus, when a teacher, hopefully if you've got a great relationship, or a principal or a business operations person comes to IT and says, hey, I want to do this, that's where we can help them do those amazing things within the context of our organization. I don't care how good your outsourced IT department is going to be, they're not going to be able to do that. And so that's the value we bring as IT. And so along with that, if the business wants more and more stuff, then we're all getting more staff, right? Is that how that works? No? No? Proportional staff? You get less staff? No? Sometimes. So if we provide business value, an organization wants more, and we are not getting proportionally more staff. We may have grown, hopefully, maybe, I'm not sure, but a lot of districts I know have grown in the last 10 years, but I'd be hard pressed to find a single district that has grown proportionally to the amount of work that they've got. And so along that, we had better make sure that we as IT departments are spending our time on what matters most. And that's that return on investment calculation, right? Because what happens if we don't perform? Then they start getting mad and, hey, IT, what the heck are you guys doing over there? And how come I don't have my stuff yet? And all that kind of things. It's really hard to firefight, keep up with the bare minimum while also blowing people's minds with the amazing things that we want to do and we can do every day. And so that's where a lot of this comes in. I study high-performing organizations all the time. I have a lot of fun doing it. I've gone to conferences. I went to a DevOps conference a month or so ago at Las Vegas, and you're getting the Netflix engineers talking to you and talking about what they do or talking with other amazing companies. I know they're tearing down stuff over there, but. And so I like to study these, and what defines high-performance organizations is they're flexible and adaptable. They're fast from inception to when it's actually providing value. That's from when you have the thought to how fast is someone actually using it. And in commercial industries, these are metrics that they actually have. So if a customer or a customer focus group or someone has a great idea for an app or an application or at Netflix, how fast is it sitting on your phone? And they measure that. High quality outcomes, of course. Low organizational failure rates and high synergy. These are all things that they are measuring. So one thing that really defines high performance organization is they can quickly identify what adds value and what is wasteful. And so they work really hard to remove, obviously, the waste side. They're constantly learning best practices. Interesting thing about best practice, there was a movement for a while that people didn't like the term best practice. They liked next practice because some idea like, oh, best practices are old. Well, you're kind of changing up the words, but your next practice is now just your best practice, so why? So what really, I heard an incredible definition. It was kind of strange, but they said what defines a high performance company is you're doing your best practice. And this could be anything from your technicians rolling trucks, how are we installing software, how are we fixing screens, how are we attending to phone calls real quick, how are we collecting data, how are we monitoring that for CalPads and things like that. The instant you find out that there's a better way to do something, maybe in that whole supply chain of fixing a Chromebook, getting back into a kid's hands, maybe we were running out of screens or something. The instant you find out that your best practice is not good enough, that's now your better practice, right? And what defines a high performance, we can all find better practices. How many times have you been in your job or been dependent on another department and you're like, man, why are they doing it that way? There's another way. I could already see 5 ways to improve that. What defines a high-performing organization is how quickly, the instant they find out that there's a better way, how quickly can they incorporate that? And so a lot of times we had technicians, and we only had 5 at the time, but when we would talk with them, we would find out, get phone calls from teachers or principals, and they'd say, hey, the new technician, because we would rotate at them everywhere, isn't quite doing it the same way, or they're in and out real quick, but then the machine breaks 3 days later. And so we started talking with our technicians, and we found out that when you have 5 technicians, you have 5 ways of doing something. And one technician was really great at fixing it quickly, but they weren't fixing it permanently. We have another technician that would take a little longer, but they would fix it permanently. Right? And so how often do we do that? So that's when we started building consistency into things. We got some automation tools and things like that. And it's really nice that now, if you have 5 technicians all using the best practice. And when one technician says, I've got a better way, how quickly can you get it to the other 5? And then now we have 8. And one thing that we realized is as we started to automate these things, we weren't training new people on an entirely new process of 8 or 10 steps. We were training them, here's how you launch the automation. Here's how you use the ticket. You go through the checkboxes. There's your knowledge base. There's your training. It's built into the ticket because we now have checkboxes. Did you check this? Did you check that? Did we do this? By the time you get to end of your checkboxes and you close the ticket, you've now fixed it the exact same way that your predecessors had before you. So that's where that is. So similar to physical to virtual, most of our applications that I would gather most of yours, if you think about it, are already hosted. So most of our EdTech curriculum is hosted. Google Apps, that's all hosted. Google Classroom. Depending on your SAS, it may be hosted, but you'd be hard pressed to find a business team that buys an application or ed services that buys an application that isn't online anymore. So like our project management, we use Trello. I know a lot of districts use Monday.com and others. We don't install Microsoft Project on our machines, right? And so already I would say 80 to 90% of the applications we use are already hosted. It's just the on-prem stuff that we've been dealing with. So this isn't scary to us. It's different. It's just who owns that right now. In a few years, I would say, and even now, it's going to be largely impossible to buy an application that comes with an install. That's going to be really difficult to do. So this is already coming. The concept of an on-prem data center is going to fundamentally change. This is our goal. We at Val Verde. I don't care if you're at a conference in Chicago, if you're at home, heck, if you're in Europe or somewhere else, depending on our privacy, our security policies. But basically, we want you to be able to do your job anywhere you can. And we don't care if it's on your laptop, on your phone, an iPad, or what. If you come to our district, you're going to get a really nice internet connection. But really, as far as your work, it's going to be no different from wherever. That's our goal. There are certain things that we will still keep on-prem, at least for now. And for us anyway, it's our security cameras, electronic locks, our phone system right now, just because we've got a well-built-in system. Security cameras, we've got about 1,000 cameras. We've talked to our police department and security officials, and they have absolutely no desire to hold that stuff on-prem. It only records for about 30 days, and then it starts overwriting itself. There's no value to them from a business perspective of us offloading that to a DR offsite, and there's a lot of expense to doing that. So that's going to be on-prem. It's an appliance, and that's how we view it right now. So anyway, this is where I see the next evolution of how we build data centers. I would think 5 years from now, if you're standing up a brand new district, let's say, if someone were to say, Matt, how are we going to build our district? We've got one we're starting up. I would say don't even bother building a data center. We need MDFs. We need IDFs, of course. We need a network infrastructure, and that's going to be a really amazing infrastructure, but I don't want to put $1 million, you know, $100,000, a few $100,000 data center, depending on your size, on-prem anymore. So I did this graph for our board when I was talking to them about what IT does all day. And I tried to let them know that there's maintenance involved in everything they buy. And so I showed them this graph. The more we acquire technology, you know, we got esports and other things right now, the more maintenance that's required. And if you don't keep up with your maintenance, now you're just fighting fires, things are breaking. We don't have any time any longer to do new things if we're not allowed to maintain. And so I told them, you know, we have 100 servers. Let's say they need an update once a month. That's 25 servers updated every single week. And their eyes started to get a little bigger when I told them that. I said, okay, we did have about 100 servers at the time because we had a lot of domain controllers at sites. 25,000 Chromebooks, 2,000 phones, it goes on and on. Security cameras, interactive displays, HVAC systems, scene devices, hundreds of online resources. And all of a sudden, I think they kind of got the picture that our little IT department maybe needs a little bit of support in everything we're doing. So we all know this, you know, tech debt and maintenance is absolutely critical. So this has got me thinking all the time. We were pressing and pressing for more staff. We were pressing for more engineers. One thing that I am kind of proud of is about 7 years ago, we had 5 technicians, like I mentioned. We've grown in staff. Our department has doubled in the time, in 12 years I've been there. We've only grown 3 more technicians. With all the 25,000 Chromebooks and everything we've added, we've only added 3 more technicians. The other staff we've added are a little more help desk, but engineers and analysts. So I think we have about 5, 6 more engineers now than we did 8 years ago. And because we're pushing, how do we automate? How do we provide more business value? How do we provide that higher end thinking? So again, is the value in this is everything we have to do. Every time, you know, if I've got an on-prem application, this is what we do. We spec the hardware, we purchase the hardware, we've got installations, we've got VMware maintenance on top of that, licensings, upgrades, and all that kind of stuff. OS updates, software updates, backups. Are we running backups? Are we swapping tapes if you have tapes? Are you testing your backups, right? What about your DR, you know? Are you tuning performance? Are you doing training? Oh, now we've got pen testing on everything. I get an email once a week. Hey, Matt, are you interested in pen testing? You know, network securing, account management, etc. All this stuff, and almost none of this has anything to do with the business outcome. It's necessary, right? And it's interesting when we talk to education staff and directors, and we talk to business staff, and they say, IT, what are you doing all day? You know, and all that kind of stuff. They see the top, maybe the top 2. They see the business outcome. And we have to explain to them, if you want this in a secure environment that's robust, that's going to be there when you need it, when the power fails and the generators kick on or there's a blip, when we're doing patching or a server goes down because of a configuration failure or something, we've got DR, we've got this, and you want to back up your data. You know, these are all things that we have to consider in order to give them the business outcome that they're looking for. But I would also say, most of this, while necessary, does not target the business value. And so the instant I find out some of this may not be necessary anymore, or at least I don't have to do it, then why am I doing it? So I kind of give the metaphor, it's a terrible metaphor, but oil changes, and you've all heard of that. I can learn how to change the oil in my own car, but I pay someone else to do it. And I do that for several reasons, but it's because the amount of money I pay someone else to do it, they're far better at it than I am. And for the time it would take me to learn how to do it well, do it up my skills and everything else, the value for me personally and my family is to spend that time elsewhere. And so that's a way that I'm maximizing my value both at work and personally by not having to maintain my own oil. And that's just a very small thing, but that's kind of what we're looking at. So is it the business value? So anyways, yeah. The value that people see and people use is at the very top, right? But there is so much underneath our HR team as they're logging into their HR system and clicking on boxes, entering data. There's so much beyond, below that that makes that possible, and that's a lot of the stuff that we do. And so that's all the required support, and that's what I want to reduce. Because again, I'm not getting any more people. I don't know about you, but we haven't done a hire in years. And so when we're talking with, we've been pushing. Again, after COVID, we got a ton of mental health therapists for our students, which is really great. Our administration realized there wasn't a lot of leadership support of our schools, and so we got assistant principals at all of our elementaries because they didn't have it. We now have PBIS coaches that were teachers. We literally have a PBIS coach at every single school. We've probably hired at least 100 plus staff in the last 2 years, and none of them are IT staff. And so we're having to support all those staff, right? That's extra workload for us. And so now we're talking about budget crunches coming, and depending on the state budget and everything else, we are not looking at more staff anytime soon. And so that's where I have to tell myself, I need to reduce everything below that line as much as humanly possible. And so the other thing I noticed is over time, you install a software 2-3 years ago, they were all gung-ho, they did all this training for teachers, all this wonderful hype and everything else, and it seems like the value out of that software maybe stays level, maybe it dips a little bit, not everyone's using it. We worked real hard to install it all, and it's not getting a whole lot of use now. The value at the top, the business value over time kind of stagnates a little bit. Unfortunately, it seems like over time, the value to support that, the work effort to support that actually increases. Because it's on slower systems, you never leave it on that server forever. Now we've got to migrate it to new servers. Windows Server is end of life. We've got to migrate that. Oh, the data center, all the hardware, the blades and everything else, that goes into life. We're replacing fabric switches. That's going to cost you another $200,000. Wait, it's still running that old business application that turns out only, 8 principals are actually logging into to run their ASB systems. It's like, hey, wait, I thought this was supposed to be used across the board. And yet we're the ones having to back it up every day. We're the ones having to watch security and everything every day, right? That work to support that never decreases proportionally with the business value, even though it's stagnating or decreasing. So, if you've worked with cloud at all, these terms you probably already know, but just to review real quick, out of this whole stack, and this is just a very basic overview, but out of that stack, again, the business impact is the top, or maybe skills and training, hopefully, if they're doing that. Everything else is what's required to run it. The hardware, redundancy, your DR, your backups, all that kind of stuff, your UPSs, and of course the network, that's all your infrastructure. And so if you want to run that in the cloud, that's your infrastructure in the server service. You're probably used to that. That's where we can buy virtual machines and compute in the cloud. Then you have your platform as a service. This is where maybe I don't even need an OS. I'm just moving our SQL databases. I don't need to run Microsoft SQL Server anymore. I can just actually create a SQL database in Azure and use that, pump data in, do a lot of stuff with it. The actual business softwares or software as a service, this is our Trello, right? We're paying some other company to run and build and handle and maintain the software for us. We're just paying for logins. And so if you're not familiar with those terms, that's pretty much how they break down. So the cloud, all 3 of these are cloud, and depending on your flavor or what you're needing to do, all 3 of these may be areas you can look for. There are times where we'll have, because we have engineers and we do some development, things like that, we've had principals especially, they'll come to us and say, hey, Matt, I've got this really great project. We'd love to set a kiosk up in the front office for kids as they're coming for referrals and they're checking in and things like that. Can you build that for us? Well, we probably could, but it's going to take at least 3 months, and that's assuming we have time to do that. Now we have to do requirements gathering and testing and all this other stuff, usability and all this stuff. Hey, you know what? There's a really cool piece of software that will do all that for you, and it costs like $30 a month. How about you go buy that? That's a lot of stuff that we're now starting to talk about. So that's what I'd love to push. Let's go straight to SaaS. Let's put the cost and effort on their team. We're happy to upload data and sync it with Active Directory or SAML or whatever we want to do. But go buy the software, because it's really interesting when they're buying it and they're speccing it out with our involvement as far as security and best practices and everything else. But they own it. And now they're handling the management, the training, and everything else, and then of course the cost. And what's really funny is if they get that bill once a month or once a year, they tend to try to actually use it to its full value. So yeah, this is the shift we're going. All of us have limited staff. Our work definitely keeps growing, and so we got to figure out a way to reduce our workload. So I've had some people. Oh, look, there's a little to-do button up there. Things I want to do, but I had a manager ask me, well, why now? Because we have Power BI, we're looking at Azure SQL, and he literally asked me, he said, Matt, this is all great, and I get it, but why now? Why is it so important? Because we were all busy. Why do this right now? And this was a conversation we had once I found out Azure SQL was affordable for us. And I said, because the instant I found out that we don't have to do SQL updates, patches, backups, our applications team would work really well with our network services team. Our applications team is backing up SQL and transactions 6 ways a Sunday. The network services team is backing up that on disk and tape. There's a lot of effort involved in there. Every time we stand up a new SQL server, we're migrating. There's 30 databases on the SQL server. 20 of them are the applications team. They're like, oh yeah, we're gonna migrate those. 5 or 6 of them are the network services team. You got your VMware logs and other things on there. They know what those are, and there's 4 left. Whose are those? I don't know. Well, how do we decommission a server if we don't know whose they are? Well, we can migrate them to the nurse server, but someone really kind of needs to test those and make sure they're working, right? And so there's anxiety and apprehension to any of that kind of stuff. I don't want it anymore. Where is the business value in any of that? The business value in SQL Server is adding rows, selecting rows, querying, security. Business value isn't in, oh, wait, are we backing up transactions often enough? And where is that? And hey, network services, you put it in a brand new GR system, this is great, but does it work with SQL 2008? Because for some reason, we still have a 2008 server lying around. So the instant I heard that, I'm like, we're done. We're done. And this is, I don't want to do it anymore. This is why I need to do it now, because I feel like personally as a director, the instant I find out we're doing something that doesn't need to be done, the longer it takes for us to get out of that workload in that realm, I just feel like we're spinning our wheels again on something that's taking our focus off of what we should be doing. Yeah, so don't you have to learn cloud? And I'm like, yeah, but we have to learn how to do things on-prem too, right? At one time when we moved from physical servers, bare metal, to VMware, we had to learn what that meant. What does it mean if I remember the exact conversation, yeah, but I can walk into the data center and actually literally hit the power button. And I can plug my monitor, VGA at the time, into the VGA port, my PS2 ports, right? And I can turn on the server in the data center. What does that mean in this VMware thing? I don't know what that means. Well, we figured that out. And so we will figure out cloud. And one thing I would say that the burden on maintaining those areas that we maybe don't have to maintain anymore probably exceeds the learning curve it will be for cloud. Now, there is going to be a burden in the beginning, right? And there's always anxiety. And I'll tell you right now, I have a lot of anxiety staying up at night. We're talking with Microsoft, and they're like, let's move all your servers right now. We can have it done in 4 weeks. And we're like, hold on. We're not ready for that. But this is something we are planning on doing. So just real quick, our journey, and this is approximate. We've been playing with a lot of stuff. We get a couple of beta testers, and then things hit the fan, and we wait 3 years, then we come back. But basically, this is just a real quick. I mean, there's other things that we're doing. I'm not talking about Dagger Fiber. This is strictly cloud stuff. And I'm not including either all the EdTech apps, right, that were bought and moved to the cloud, things we used to carry on-prem, and then they went and bought something online, and then we got ClassLink, and we're moving data. I'm not talking about all that, but mainly we got rid of our Exchange server somewhere around 2014. That was a lot of anxiety. That was a ton. Never gonna go back. Azure AD somewhere around 2018. I didn't have a chance to check these dates with my network manager, but hopefully I'm close. OneDrive, we started moving people to IT first, of course. We started playing with this thing called Power BI. It was on our own desktops. Our ed team, they've got a great data guy. We were playing with things. We were hitting on-prem SQL servers, of course. But we started playing with that. Got to be a nuisance, trying to give licenses out to everybody. Where the heck do we host this stuff? We bought Power BI Premium. Now all of our Power BI reports are 100% in the cloud. SharePoint, as far as shared files, I don't know how many of you have played with SharePoint. It's changed flavors for the last 20, 30 years, but and it's an incarnation as far as department files. Intune. We've been playing with Intune, trying a lot of things, imaging and installing and things like that. Then COVID hit, we had to learn how to use Intune real quick, zero-touch laptops and things like that. Now 100% of all our deployments for user devices is 100% in Intune. DNS, we moved over, like you mentioned, in 2022. 2023, we now do Sentinel, if you're not familiar with that, but that's all of our firewall and server and AD logging is now pushed off to the cloud as well. One reason why we actually did that is because for cybersecurity, we don't have time to run our cybersecurity, right? We are not cybersecurity experts. I don't have time to hire engineers who are being sent off to Black Hat. That's really cool. They're also not awake at 2 in the morning on a Sunday when you get attacked. So we do have a wonderful full service 365 company who's doing all of our cybersecurity, and one of their requirements was, well, they need access to our logs in real time, and we said, how do we do that? And so we looked at Sentinel on Azure, and that's what we're doing. We do have one production database in SQL right now. It's only one. It was a small one, but it works great. And when we turn that thing on and disable it on the server, we're like, woohoo, we are literally running one of our services for one of our business teams on a SQL database in Azure, yeah.
So for Sentinel, we
Yes.
played with it for a while too. How much data is it ingesting a day? Because what it came to for us is, it seemed like a great proposition because some things are free, it's all
Yes.
there, right? But when it came to, okay, we're gonna send DNS logs, we're gonna send the domain controller, and we're gonna send firewall, well then, okay, once we started going back to the pencil, map, whatever it is, it was going to be extremely expensive for it to actually ingest all of the data that we needed. And then we went and looked at other products, and then for that ingestion price, there's other things we could afford that we think maybe meet our needs better.
Yeah.
One different way.
So I'm looking at my network manager, Brian, back there. Do you have an answer to?
The exact amount of data we're ingesting, I don't remember what that number is, but we are, everything that you talked about. We found it on Microsoft really hard, because the other tool was Sumo Logic they use, and their cost for us was going to be sub $100,000 a year, and Sentinel was well over that.
So that was
So,
similar.
but we hammered it, we got even below Sumo Logic.
Yeah.
So Microsoft will work with
Hammer them, and just say, hey, I've got AWS literally handing me free passes to their AWS events. They want to do free training, all this kind of stuff. And hey, Microsoft, why aren't you at the table? What the heck are you doing?
A different direction with a whole different suite.
Yeah.
We needed multiple boxes checked in.
Yeah, and another reason why we looked at that is because, again, our cybersecurity firm that we employed, they had some best of breed, and the price, even though, we're paying $70, I want to say, that's budgeted for the year. That doesn't sound cheap. 70 grand for logging is not cheap, but we had a terrible on-prem, open source or whatever. We had a server that if I tell you the name, it's like, oh yeah, we've heard of that. How come people aren't doing that more? It was not working out for us. The care and feeding was horrible. And at the other costs of our cybersecurity, our MDR and all that kind of stuff, network sensors and monitors on the devices was kind of all bundled together. And so when we approached our board with the cost of our cybersecurity initiative, Sentinel was part of that. So, and 2024, we're playing with Microsoft Fabric, Azure Fabric, if you're familiar with that. That's their whole data suite, data lake, and stuff like that. And our goal is that, and I'll be here next year if you want, and we can talk about what our goal is if you're interested, but our goal is 90% of our SQL databases and data center will actually be running in Azure. That is our goal. Yes?
For now, so you got the SQL server in there, so your on-prem servers going to the SQL server to pull the data down, like over the internet?
So our only SQL database that's in there right now is a very low-end database. It does have an IIS web front end that is on-prem, and it is talking to SQL in the cloud. All we did was change the connection string, and it has no clue that it's not talking to a server that's virtually right next door. Actually, virtually it is next door.
One of my concerns over the years has always just been latency, and what would that look like in kind of high-end applications that have super low latency?
So we are talking about that stuff, and I'll share a little bit about that later. But yeah, that's why we picked a low-hanging fruit first.
Yeah.
Now, when you do get to Azure, and if you have your, let's say, a typical, like our ITSM, our IT ticketing system, it has a SQL server, and it's got the web front end, the business application server, and and they need to talk to each other. But if you put them both in Azure, you can, you can put boundaries around that. Depends on your speed and everything else. And of course, now we talk about VPN spanning and all that kind of stuff. And so that all plays into it. But there are ways around that depending on your connection. So anyway, it was always really costly. And so I wanted to show you numbers. And we had a hard time getting these numbers. We talked to several consultants and groups about analyze our system, let us know. We have no clue. They're like, oh, go to the Microsoft Azure dashboard. We're looking at the dashboard and I'll click. There's 87 different options of a server to buy. And if I click on one, it's $5 a day. If I click on another one, it's $5,000 a day. And I'm like, hold on. My biggest fear is, am I going to show up with a bill? I'll get an emergency alert on my phone at 2 in the morning. And by the time I get into the office, I've got a $100,000 bill, And so what's really strange is we talked to 2 or 3 very high level consultants, partners, and they could not give us information. We were just beating our heads against the wall. And so our rep from Microsoft is Fady. He's really great. And Microsoft actually did the assessment for us. And so they put, a sensor on your data center, and they capture logs for about a week or so, and then they go and churn over the numbers. And so this is all monthly pricing. I put the yearly pricing at the bottom. I don't know how easy it is to see, but scenario 1, and I'll talk through this real quick. Scenario 1, if we just lift and shift our servers. And I don't know how many are you familiar with that lift and shift term? A lot of people have heard it. It means literally it's already running in VMware. It's all VMs, right? Let me just pick it up, transfer it to Microsoft and turn it on. And they can do that. In fact, they can have a VMware console running in Azure if you're interested in that. But this is literally taking my server that, for me, it's got, several terabytes of disk space that's carved up. I've got, we've got 64 cores in it. It's got an amazing amount of RAM. Is it hitting 95% of power? Usage? No. It's hitting like 20, maybe 30%. We're watching it. I don't want it to hit 90%, because if it hits 90%, I've got people on the phones complaining, right? We over scale our servers because we don't know. It's got to work the very beginning of school when everyone's hitting at the same time. It's got to work at the end of school and everywhere in between. And so if you lift and shift our servers, $416,000 a year. We're now approaching more than $2 million for Azure cost if I do nothing else over 5 years. And I project everything in 5 years because that's about our data center hardware, how often we replace it. That is not of interest to me. That is not something I can do. So this is where we're talking with them, and this is where I get freaked out. So, and let you know, it says 37 servers up there. It says 4 removed. So again, I mentioned we had about 100 servers. Well, we got rid of all our on-prem services, domain controllers and things like that, edge servers at the sites. We have dark fiber. We've got a pretty decent fiber network now. So all of our stuff is localized. As servers started to die, we just figured, let's not replace it. We don't have time to get there right now. And all of a sudden we realized, oh, our high school without an on-prem domain controller is still happily logging in just fine. So we don't need that anymore. So we did consolidate a lot of our servers over the last few years. And then also we're taking out our development servers, just play stuff. So this is literally production. When they analyzed our servers, you'll see it says 4 removed because they said, Matt, when we analyze your system, 4 of your servers are taking the huge brunt of your compute storage and things like that. And I think one of them might be Laserfish. Yeah. So they said it may not be quite economical right now to move everything, but we can move most of it. And they did give me pricing for everything. But when I was like, well, I'm not ready to move Laserfish to Azure right now anyway. That is not happening on my comfort level. And so are you telling me I can remove 95% of our servers to the cloud right now for this pricing? And that's very attractive. And so we went through the scenarios. Scenario 2, they call it right sizing. That's where through the analysis and everything, let's scale that server down to just the compute power and memory and stuff it needs. And so if we have busier times of the year, we'll scale it up a little bit. If you've got slower times of the year, we'll scale it down. And so that brought the price way down. Scenario 3 is called Azure Hybrid Benefit. That's something I had never heard before. And I'm pounding on Microsoft. We have this incredible CAMSA deal. We are getting our Windows servers, our user licenses, and our SQL database servers licenses for incredibly cheap. Absolutely incredibly cheap. Why the explicative, Microsoft, are you charging me retail price in Azure? And that's what they were doing. So just last year, and I'm looking at the dates because I'd never heard of this until a few months ago, but one of their timestamps on their PowerPoint showed me it was sometime in 2022. They have this thing called an Azure Hybrid Benefit. And I don't know why they call that because we're not running hybrid servers, but basically what it allows you to do is use your on-prem licensing against Azure resources. So now I can buy 47 Windows Server OSs under our CAMSA licensing and apply that to our Azure cost. And I said, well, wait a minute, explain how that means. And he says, if you have, you know, and they do it by cores and things like that, but dollar for dollar, actually compute for compute, if I buy 37 servers worth of OSs on our CAMSA licensing, that will translate to 37 servers worth of OS licensing in Azure. Suddenly, that drops their price to just a little shy of $8,000 a month, $94,000 a year. Now we're starting to talk about something. $500,000 for 5 years, much more attractive. Definitely less than the cost of my hardware for my data center if I have to replace it every 5 years. And then they have what they call reserved instances. And so if you're not familiar with that, what that means is I want to buy a server that has this much compute, I've got this many cores, I've got this much RAM, this much storage, and I know I'm going to use that. So rather than paying your daily rate, your monthly rate that fluctuates, I'm going to reserve that for 3 years. And when you do that, Amazon has the same thing. I'm assuming Google does too. When you do that, you get a drastically reduced price because you're basically committing to that compute power. And so in the old days, you literally bought that instance and that was yours. And the thing where I was like, I'm not too interested in that either because I don't know if I'm going to run half these applications 2 years from now. I don't know if the quality or the performance of these applications is going to increase over time or decrease. I don't want to hang on to an instance for 3 years that I'm not going to be using. Well, one thing that's really nice, what they do with their reserved instance pricing now, he said, think about it like your cell phone and rollover minutes. He says, you're not buying literally an instance like we used to years ago. You're not literally buying an instance that has this many cores. What you're buying is a 3-year commitment for a number of cores and a number of RAM and storage that you can carve out and split up any way you want. And he says, what we do is if you end up using more, we're going to charge you the monthly rate for just that overhead. We're going to use reserved instance pricing for everything up to that amount. And if you play a little more, you use more, we're going to charge you the monthly rate for that extra little bit. So with that said, for all 37 of our servers, if we upload it to the cloud for Azure, it's going to run us $4,700 a month or about $56,000 a year. So now we're talking about running 95% of our data center for 5 years for about $275,000. And I said, okay, I want Microsoft, someone to sign a contract in blood or something. Are you absolutely serious? Is this real? And so they said, yes, our engineers have gone over it, our data analysts have gone over it, and these are the numbers you're looking at, yeah.
So, I mean, that sounds pretty sound. My question is, so, and this is what gets me sometimes.
Yes.
So you still have to have some amount of on-prem left.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So then what you end up doing is you're going to pay, I think, substantially more for the few things you have on-prem because you can't do VMware less than a 3-node cluster. You can't do, so there's a certain cost to entry when you do it on-prem, right, with VDI and all
yes.
those things.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, then things start getting cheaper per amount you add on.
Yeah.
There's that initial outlay. So like Laserfish and those things, the cost to actually run those is going to increase, right?
Yeah, and we're still running a data center too, right? I mean, we're still powering, we got UPS backup, and also all that equipment's currently purchased. It's not like I'm going to be able to sell off half of it. So I am going to be paying extra because I've already paid for the hardware, right? So now I'm technically be paying a little extra, but the point is we're not having to replace all of that hardware as it starts to go end of life. And eventually, and I've already got told my cabinet about this, we might have a bump in costs, but then eventually we'll actually come a little below the line of what we're doing right now. But you're right, there is minimum costs we are going to have to meet. Yeah, Brian?
Where you'll see the savings is that you're not going to buy that 1 terabyte host with 48 or 64 CPUs. You're going to buy a much smaller.
Yeah.
True.
And so you'll see your cost savings on your next refresh, that you're not spending $500,000 and you're spending $100,000.
Yeah.
So you're going to still have some CapEx costs, but with this, you're looking at all options.
The things that we have that I don't know how to move to the cloud, but it starts to get what I think is ridiculously expensive are the storage, like you were talking Laserfish, right?
Yes.
It's the storage intense things, right? So
Yes.
You've got a media server, you've got things like that that are into the, 10 terabyte range. When you start paying for storage like that in the cloud, it gets ridiculously bad, expensive, and like right out of the gate.
It can, and one thing that I'll mention too is this is all moving servers. So like our SQL databases, I have no intention of moving that server. So now we start talking about, can we use platform as a service? And same thing with storage. If you've got a media server, I'm not sure how your media works, but I know when we used to have a media server, 90% of the media was never touched, right? We had years worth of footage on this thing. And that could all sit in Glacier storage or low performance storage.
We've got a lot that's tied to like grants and contracts where they've built like adult education, learning systems and things like that. There's just tons of videos embedded in.
So you have on-prem video, and this is just me understanding. You have.
I would love I would love for this not to be the case, but we probably have the largest Moodle instance in existence because, yeah.
And do you see having that 5 years from now?
Yes. Yeah.
Really?
They've got the last contract they signed 2 years ago takes it through 2027.
Wow.
So there's no way. I've looked at moving that like as a
Yes.
service into something, and that's $20,000, $30,000 a month.
And so that falls into a bucket, like I said.
It's like the outlier stuff. It's like I don't know how to ever get that there, and that's still going to require a significant on-prem like investment.
Yes.
So then it ties some of this other stuff financially.
And your county office, right? You were Jerry? Yeah.
I'm Jerry's head maybe.
Hey. So that's again, yeah, cloud's not 100% for every single thing right now. And while your example is way far bigger than ours.
Extreme use case, but
Yeah. Our Laserfish, we're not moving now. We may move it eventually, but when we do move it eventually, I don't want to move a server with a ton of storage. I want to look at using their storage facilities with tiered storage. We're also not going to move a SQL database that's horrendously huge on a server. I'm going to look at using their SQL as a service, right? And then like our security cameras, there's just no cost, business value reason to move that at all. And so similar, yeah, and maybe soon there will be. But not right now. So I totally agree. But the other thing I thought was, well, if we can move 37 of our servers and we're maintaining our 5 biggest servers, that's still a huge workload off of our backups and DR. And I would much rather plan out a DR for our 4 most intensive servers than 37 servers, right? So, so how do we get there? Here's some strategies for all of you. I would definitely say your 2 biggest things are greenfield stuff, if you're not familiar with that. Greenfield are brand new projects. Brownfield are maintenance, legacy, current projects. So it's like, the green grass and stuff like that. If you have a brand new thing, and this is what we're trying to do, and I've told my team, if you've got a brand new request that requires a SQL server, even if it's an on-prem install or something else, it's not critical. You've got time, a couple of months to do testing and install and training. Try it out on Azure in the cloud. I don't ever want to spin up a brand new SQL database, not even just a server, but I don't even want to add a new database to one of our servers. Now, that's with the caveat of, do we have time to set that up, cut our teeth on it, and learn it and things like that? Because if they need it by tomorrow and I've got 10,000, I've got 1,000 teachers that are about to go into a gym to do training and they forgot to tell IT, and now I've got to have this up and running in less than 24 hours, we're not going to put that in Azure SQL. We're going to do what we know how to do. But my idea is, when possible, anything brand new, let's utilize these services. Also, simple, non-critical servers and services. So again, our SQL database, our very first one, we picked a database that's a business value. It is used, it's hit throughout the week, but it's hit by 5 or 6 people. And it's something that if it were to go down for an hour or 2, maybe even a day, it would not cause the district to fall over. And so this is something we let them know. We're trying something. If it gets a little slow, let us know. And we did a whole cutover. We did a lot of testing. Of course, a lot of guys, we've been in training, we've been talking to Microsoft. This isn't something you just go take a quick Microsoft training course and then go through it. You want to do this methodically. But that's what we did. We picked something small, something that we could bang up and test around. Next, we're going to pick some other things that are a little more intense. But it's really funny because when you go and set up a SQL server in Azure, what we would typically do, and this is standard practice we've had over years. I'm almost done, sorry. We're looking at backups. Okay, how business critical is this? Are we backing it up once a day? Oh, definitely. Do we back up transactions? Are we doing that every 2 hours? These are questions we would have. How long do you keep backups on disk versus, tape or on the actual backup system? And we would have these questions. Well, when you spin up SQL database in Azure, it's basically default is it okay if we back this thing up real time every 2 hours? Like full backups, not differentials, full backups. I got 12 backups every single day, and is it okay if we keep that backup for over a month? And then we're gonna go to monthlies. I'm like, that's way better than our continuity plan was on-prem. So sure, and then you can pay a little bit more to have backups to span and pass a year or more often. So some of the questions and concerns we had are actually much better done in the cloud. This is another thing Microsoft now is making available called their CSU Migration Factory. We're talking about this, and this is like my last slide. So if you're willing to hang out for 2 more minutes. What they're doing is they're now offering free migration, and he says it doesn't matter whether you have 1 server, 100 servers, or 1,000 servers, we're offering free migration for you. And what they do is they create a team. They do the analysis again. They make sure they talk with you. What servers are we moving? If we're right sizing, what does that look like? Licensing and costs and all that stuff. And then they move all those configurations and specs and everything. They build your Azure environment, and then they move it over to an integration team who run automations. And they said, basically, we could have all 37 of your servers up in Azure within less than a week. And they said it's free. I said, why is this free? And they said, Matt, honestly, you're paying us for Azure compute and storage. So we're happy to get your servers up there. We're the ones putting the brakes on that. We're not ready. I'm not ready to wake up 3 weeks from now and have all of our servers in Azure. We're just my network team. They're dealing with a lot. They need to wake up and go, where's the button again? How do I power this thing off and on again? So we're going to do some intense training and things like that, but we're going to start moving. And I said, let's do 2 of these. Let's do 1 phase with like 5 low-hanging fruit servers. Let's cut our teeth on this. Let's figure it out. And then maybe as we start moving other stuff ourselves, maybe towards the end, we'll move our last 20, 25 servers through your team. But the idea is they will do all this for you. And because they're doing it, they're engineers and they're scaling everything out, it's set up with all the connections and security and everything that you need for your system. This is not network spanning, though. That's a big thing. These are literally shifting your servers, right-sizing, configuring everything, but they are not spanning your network. There's no VPNs and things like that, and they wanted to be very clear. This is truly, we are moving, we're not architecting, we're not, as far as refactoring, we're not moving databases off into SQL as a database for you. So it's an engagement that they scope out and then hand to a team, and then they run their tools. So we are looking at more advanced things. Another thing we're looking at is Microsoft's Premier support, which honestly we don't have. We have Premier support on all our Cisco gear. We've got all other kinds of stuff. We've got support on our data centers and electrical and everything else. We don't have Premier support in Microsoft. And that sounds weird, but we have ran Microsoft ourselves for the last 30 years. And honestly, when we have a weird hiccup with something, we call Microsoft 24 hours later. I get an email that says, oh, we tried to contact you at 2 Indian time, and we didn't get a hold of you. Well, the Premier support is pretty much like our Cisco SmartNet support. We get engineers, we get 15-minute response, 5-minute response, depending on escalations. We get free training. You get their entire training catalog for free, and you get free one-on-one training. Yeah.
Do you have it now?
We are getting it. They're quoting it out for us.
One of my biggest districts is like, I need literally about half an hour.
Oh, really?
Yes, just FYI. So, and I don't know details, but they've had peer support for years.
Yeah.
Just talked about, it's just not been great. They're questioning whether they should keep it because it costs them money.
So I'll bring that up to them, and I'll say, this is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, when you say 15-minute response time, I don't think they get that, but
Yeah.
again, I'll have to find out more.
It looks like it's going to cost us around $50,000 a year. But again, we pay more than that for our Cisco SmartNet. I would never, ever turn off our SmartNet. I mean, there's just no way. And then from a business continuity point of view, as I'm laying awake at night, I'm like, how is it that we actually don't have some sort of professional enterprise support for our Microsoft? We have support that comes with our A5 and CAMSA licenses and things like that. But the other thing I will tell you is hardly anyone in K-12 is doing this. And so we are talking with Microsoft, we're pushing on them. And one thing I would definitely keep pushing on all of you to do, especially county office level and everything, is saying, hey, if you want more people in California or the rest of the nation to do this, help us do it, and it better work. The cost better be great, the performance better be great, and the support better be great. Because if we fall down, you guys aren't coming out looking good on this. And that type of constructive criticism has been fairly useful for us. And they know where they sit. So that's really about it. I'm sorry I went about 6 minutes over. I hope that was useful. This is our strategy. This is our plan. This is where we're going, the resources we have. Maybe next year at CITE, we'll come and have champagne and do a wrap-up party, and we'll tell you how well it went. Or if we're not presenting, maybe you can read the writing on the wall. But so anyway, thank you so much. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.